one of the things I started doing on bigger snakes, which seems dumb, but it works. It works so well, is I'll actually dive on them, flip over onto my back, hold the head up here, and then wrap my legs around the bottom of the body and just like jujitsu, like an arm bar.
Them out, yeah.
I'll just like straighten out that whole section. And as much as they're trying to throw that coil, I'm strong enough with my core to just keep that coil from coming up. And I've subdued 15-foot animals in 30 seconds flat. Just because the second they know that you have the advantage, they'd rather play dead and hope you leave them alone than try and fight a losing battle.
This is the Tom Rowland Podcast. Fascinating stories to amaze, encourage, and inspire you in fishing, fitness, and the outdoors. And we're brought to you by Black Rifle Coffee. I started this podcast as a way to connect with my friends, people that I admire and respect, and you. It has been a learning journey that's made me a better person, a better fisherman, a better father, and a better athlete. I'm so happy that you're on this journey with me, and I'd love to hear from you with show suggestions, guest suggestions, or questions. The best way to get a hold of me is through text. You can text 305-930-7346 for the fastest response, but if you prefer to email, you can send that to podcast@saltwaterexperience.com. That's a dedicated email address just for the show. If you like this show, you can show your support by posting about it on social media and tagging me. Text the link to a couple of friends that may also enjoy it, and subscribe and leave a 5-star review if you feel like I've earned it. The website is tomrowlandpodcast.com, and that is where everything lives. All past shows, you can go and listen to any show. You can look up all the different shows that we've done, both the How To Tuesdays, the full links, and the Physical Fridays. They all live on tomrowlandpodcast.com. And the social media is Tom_Rowland, ROWLAND, on Instagram, or you can go to our big account, Saltwater_Experience. I hope to hear from you soon. So now, let's get on to today's show.
Hey, I'm Kevin Pavlidis, known as Snakeaholic, and this is the Tom Rowland Podcast.
So what have you been up to, man?
With not too much lately.
No?
It's been, well, I'll say from now I got some, are you taping all this already?
Yeah, let's go. Let's roll.
All right. Yeah, it's been it's an interesting time of year transitional wise. So I've been laying low a little bit and, got some political stuff I'm working on at the moment. So
political? What kind of political stuff?
Probably shouldn't get too deep into it, but had some conflicts with management staff with the Python program.
Oh.
So I got some stuff going on there, but that's independent of the actual animals. So I'm probably going to avoid talking about most of that and stick more to biology and, actual
that's fine.
hunting skills.
So you said that it is kind of an off time of the year for hunting. Is that why is that?
All right. So this is a really interesting time of year. As the temperatures change, we get into that winter pattern. The snake's behavior changes with the weather. So I consider the winter to be the most skillful time of year where you really need to know biology. You really have to have skills. And the reason for that really is in the summer, these snakes are on a feeding pattern. And again, we're talking about invasive Burmese pythons in South Florida. Mm-hmm. So in the summer, it's just purely hunting. They're just looking for prey. They're moving around. So their movements are a lot more random. And you can't I'll start hunting as the sun goes down. And basically from the sun goes down until 3 a.m, my odds of finding a python are pretty much neutral. They're pretty much the same. You have the same odds. And, but once you get into the winter season, it's totally different because these snakes' movements are not randomized. Males are looking for females. Females are finding suitable breeding habitat. They're moving back and forth between that. They're changing their body positioning based on temperature, sun positioning, daylight hours, stuff like that. So you really start to have to dial it in. And so, for example, last year in January, like my inner circle, my mini team inside of our big Python teams, we tracked one female for about 3 weeks until we found her. And we knew she was in the area because she had these big basking pads, and we could tell she was there. She was big. And it took 3 weeks of like, we'd find, males near her. We'd find new basking pads that weren't there before, but it took 3 weeks until we actually found her. And when we did, she was just shy of 15 feet and 118 pounds.
Wow. So in those 3 weeks, like, you're finding these basking pads where she's been sleeping, I guess, and the males, and that she's right there. And then do you guys just split up and you're just like looking everywhere, and you still can't find her for 3 weeks?
Yep.
So what does she do? Go underground, or what does she do?
It's just dense vegetation. So she would just burrow into it and just disappear. And even the day that I actually finally found her, it wasn't obvious. It was a needle in the haystack. Still, I just got lucky. But we had seen her basking pads moving back and forth, and we had it narrowed down to like a maximum 100-yard stretch. We knew it was like that or smaller, and it was a tight window. So we would just run that same spot over and over and over again, and she would have new pads here and new pads there. And every time we found a new pad, we'd go down, we'd just sweep the whole area, like just comb through everything, try and follow any sort of tunneling through the grass that we could find. Couldn't find her. And then when I finally actually got to her, and again, the pads that we're talking about, there's actually two different types of pads. There's basking pads and breeding pads. And it's just, you see the difference in the animals. So when they're cold, they're just going to come out, get some sun. They just come out, they make usually circular pads, or they'll just hang a coil out, like minimal exposure. They're so secretive. They'll just expose the minimum amount, get that sunlight in. And then when they're done, just right back into the dense vegetation.
That's so enough. Like depending on the temperature, I guess, but that would be enough, like in moderate temperatures, just to have a little bit of exposure to the sun to warm up. Yeah.
So I've seen it, and I heard about it before I saw it, where especially the big females, they'll only hang certain parts of their body out. So for example, they'll expose just like the heart and the head. Like just those critical areas to warm up that blood, or even just the heart section, like a 6-inch section of pattern, they'll just push that out into the sun. So it warms the heart, and then all that warm blood circulates through their whole body. So they expose the minimum amount of themselves. So they're not vulnerable, but they still get that temperature.
Wow.
And the gravid females, like the females, once they have eggs and they're like getting close to laying them, a lot of times they'll only hang out the part of their body that has the egg follicles in it. So they'll just hang that out into the sun. The rest of them is off in the bushes, completely concealed.
Now, what if it gets really cold? Like, say it gets into the 50s. Are they going to maintain that kind of behavior, or do they have to get straight out in the open?
Believe it or not, the colder the temperatures, the less likely they are to bask. There's actually a sweet spot. Like once you get too cold, they typically don't come out. They'll sit back in the water, which will retain a little bit more, heat, or they'll just pull into dense vegetation and hold that heat in. But like, if it gets like below 50, like I'll still go out, but like my expectations are way lower than if we have moderate to cool temperatures, because they have that optimal range where they like to sit. And for me, I've always seen it be right around 80 degrees is like their optimal temperature, but they can get their bodies like way up or way down. And, but I've always seen right around 80 is like their optimal body temperature. So they'll come out and like, once you have a night drops down in the mid 50s, as soon as that sun comes up and starts baking in, as soon as they feel the temperatures actually rising, then they'll be like, all right, time to bask. And they'll just come out and get that body temperature up to where they want it in the mid 80s or low 80s or something like that. And then they'll retreat and they'll go back in. And that's one of the things I was saying is why it's so like you need real skill, because you need to be able to predict at what time are they going to bask? How long are they going to bask? Where are they going to bask? And it's not just random. Like you dial it in. I knew every year I get, okay, if I'm going to this levee because of this sun angle, I need to be here at this time. And the snakes are most likely to be in this type of vegetation. And you could literally dial it in like that. And some days it was like clockwork, just like they're here this time, boom, snake, boom, snake, boom, snake, go home.
Wow.
Like
that's crazy. And so this time of the year, they've got to, I mean, at some point they have to eat something, right? So how long can they go with this behavior without eating anything?
A lot of these snakes will actually go the entire winter without feeding at all.
Really?
So they'll go from now, like November-ish, until April, May without eating anything. And the females will actually go even longer than that because they have to lay the eggs and incubate them and like gestate and all that to get those babies to hatch out. So they'll stop feeding in like November, December, somewhere around there, and they won't feed again until July at that point.
So when they come out of that, do they just kind of eat something small and then kind of work their way up, or do they go right for the freaking
they're extremely opportunistic, so
right.
They'll just take advantage of whatever they can get. However, it's very obvious when you find them in that state because they're just like borderline emaciated. But one of those super interesting things that I've noticed, mostly just from doing necropsies on post-gravid females, for whatever reason, through that like egg laying process and producing babies, their fat follicles actually don't diminish completely, but their like muscle tissue does. So I guess like just the producing those eggs just pulls so much nutrients from their actual like muscle reserves as opposed to the actual fat follicles. Because I've had females that are just like skin and bones, but you open them and they have decent fat reserves.
That's
really
crazy.
Interesting.
So it must be the protein. They need the protein for the eggs, and so they're pulling the protein from their muscles, and then
they do.
Yeah, that's right, baby. That's right. Everybody needs protein if you're gonna get swole.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I get that a lot because I don't know if I told you this last time, but this is my 5th year being vegan.
Yeah.
And so I get the protein questions all the time.
And 5th year being vegan. Why did you go vegan 5 years ago?
So I've been thinking about it for many, many years because like animals are 100% like just my life. Like I dedicate so much of my life to, education and saving these animals and working as hard as I can for, to just save animals, save species and take good care of them. And it always felt a little bit, of a conflict in my head about like the fact that I work so hard to save this species, but then I eat this one. And it was a little bit of a dilemma for me for many years, but I never really thought too deep into it. And it really just hit me in college because like I got into the slaughterhouse videos and all that propaganda and, the factory farming. And at one point it just started to sit in. And I remember the day, and I didn't make a big deal about it either. I was sitting in my dining hall at college, just eating this big plate of greasy chicken wings. And just all of a sudden it just hit me. I was like, I don't want to eat this anymore. And it was like that light switch, didn't tell anyone, didn't make a big stink about it. Just, that was it. And never looked back.
Yeah. So when you do that, like what do you go to? Did you already have like a pretty healthy amount of vegetables in your diet, or was it like a big change?
So it was both, because I kind of grew up like vegetables were like my candy. Like I was always eating fruits and vegetables. Yeah. Well, because I gave up refined sugars when I was like 15. Mm-hmm. So just because like my dad was doing it, I looked up to him and I was like, I'm not eating sugar either. And I gave it up. And ever since then, like, my mom was really big into like, she always had a garden in our backyard. She always did this community shared agriculture, mm-hmm. which basically borderline pay a membership to a farm. Yeah. And they give you a percentage of the crops they earn with that, like that they produce with that money that you send in to fund them. I've seen
those, like a co-op kind of thing.
Yeah. So I grew up in that. So it was always like, I was always into vegetables and everything. Like that was a big thing. But in college, I got really into bodybuilding. So when I I transitioned, basically when I was at my peak in college, I was eating 1.5 pounds of meat a day, a quart of yogurt every day, a lot of times drinking milk on top of that. And so tons and tons of animal products, like just in my diet.
So is that like a pound, like a more than a gram of protein per body weight? Is that what you were going for?
Yeah, I was. So I peaked out at like 190, but I was routinely getting over 200 grams of protein a day.
Mm-hmm.
So I was following that 1 gram of protein per body weight, and the more is better mentality on top of that. So I was doing that for years, and it worked. But then when I had to transition, like, and the other thing too is like, I'm Greek and I was raised Greek too. So when we have holidays, there's a lot of meat involved.
Yeah.
Like Greek Easter are like the big thing my dad and I were always hyped about was they always had a goat on a spit.
Nice.
And we would literally just sit there and just peel pieces off. And that was like our thing. So it was like, and I had said for many, many years when I was younger, like, oh, I could never be vegetarian. I could never be vegan. And I always said that. And then here we are.
Yeah. Well, the Greeks also have, there's a lot of salad and olives and stuff like that in the Greek diet too, right? I mean, it's meat, but there's a lot of vegetables and salad, right? Or am I wrong?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a little nervous to go back and visit Greece again and try and like maintain that diet, just because I know like they're very big into meat and just heavy foods. But no, I mean, I like literally just 2 nights ago, I did like a Greek style tofu that I did. And it was just like, a lot of oregano and olive oil and, heavy salt.
Yeah. Was it good?
Yeah. Oh, it was great. Yeah. I'm big on lemons too. That's big in their diets.
Yeah.
And, but I've tried to replicate a lot of that. And like one of the things one of the recipes I go to a lot is like, it's like I use tofu to basically imitate like feta. And because I grew up, I ate a lot of feta when I was a kid.
Yeah, that's a good cheese. I like feta cheese.
I used to eat so much of that because we used to get it too, like the imported one, like that they would literally ship it over in big barrels, and then they'd cut you like a big block out of it, and all the time. So I try and find like ways to mimic my comfort foods from when I was a child. But and try and like bring those flavors back in.
So like, what do you eat on a regular basis? Like what does a day look like as a vegan snake hunter?
So for me right now, I'm coming up on my 1-year anniversary of getting back in the gym. So when I moved from New York, I used to live in New York, and I moved down here to Florida to, wrestle alligators and catch pythons. And when I moved, everything kind of got jumbled. So my like 5-year streak in the gym, I abandoned it for like almost 2 years. So I'm right now coming back up on my 1-year anniversary of getting back in. So since I got back into the gym, I obviously had to take charge of my diet again and start bulking and increase my caloric intake, keep that surplus going. So right now I'm eating close to 4,000 calories a day. And I start the bulk of that with just a massive shake. Like I literally just fill the blender with raw oats, oat milk, peanut butter, hemp seeds, flax seeds. I have these mixed berries bags and then a bunch of bananas, and I can actually fit 3,000 calories into that blender, and it has around 100 grams of protein in that just from the plants that I put in it. So automatically I'm starting my day out with, once I actually finish that shake, I've intake 3,000 calories, over 100 grams of protein, over 80 grams of fat, and just of natural healthy fats, and like 400 grams of carbs. But like it's already a huge intake. And for me, I've recalculated my protein intake based on a equation I got from Nimai Delgado, who's actually he was the first IFBB professional bodybuilder like that was vegan. So I got a lot of cool stuff from him as I was transitioning and doing my research. And I guess that's really the big thing, is whenever you start something new, the knowledge has to be there. You have to do your research, you have to learn. So he gave me an equation that instead of this like 1 gram per pound of body weight, instead I go with So we calculate our lean muscle mass.
Yeah.
So you assume how much your body fat percentage is, you subtract that out, you get your lean muscle mass. You do that. And then because you don't have to feed the fat, you only have to feed the muscle. And then from that, there's an additional FDA recommendation that says 0.8 or 0.9 times that. So I use those numbers, and I found that for me, my intake should be between 127 grams of protein and 142 per day. So if I'm starting out with 100 and I only need 30 to 40 grams of protein, that's so easy. You're going to get that in any meal. So for me, figuring out how to get my shakes up and the protein and caloric intake up makes my whatever other meals I get, I know I'm going to hit my protein intakes for the day, and it's not going to be a problem. So it's actually a lot easier than I thought it would be. But that's only after, I was very big into calorie tracking everything. I have a food scale, and I really like MyFitnessPal and Chronometer. And I just use those two to track everything that I'm eating. But building that knowledge basis lets me eat intuitively now, because I actually know what I'm eating,
right? Which
is really a bigger issue in our society as a whole, is so many people are just unaware of what they're eating and what it does to their bodies. No matter what your diet is, most people don't even think about it. Most people look at a food label and they have no idea what any of that stuff means.
Right. Unless there's one particular thing that they're told they should track, like calories or fat grams or protein or something, and you go straight for that. But the best that I've ever done is with my diet is probably Zone, which is 40% carbohydrate. 40% of your calories come from carbohydrates, 30 from protein, 30 from fat, and it could be from any source. You could be totally on the vegan plan and have your proportions be that. But when I did that for really, really strict for about 5 or 6 years, just like you're talking about, I measured and weighed every single thing that I ate. And you only have to do that for a little while before you can look at something and go, yeah, that's about 30 grams of protein. That's, that particular food is incredibly high in carbohydrates. So I can only have a very small amount of that, rather than, and most of those foods come in bags that they measure by the pound, and it's like, that's where you get way off track, is you eat that kind of stuff and you're eating so many calories and so much carbohydrates and really don't have any idea that that's what's going in. And I don't know, my ratios would get all messed up. And then once I got that 40, 30, 30 down to where I was eating that every single meal and hitting the protein requirement for the day, everything was great. And I've done some semblance of that since then, and it really makes me feel a lot better. You put a lot of thought into that, but when you eat a 3,000 calorie shake with 100 grams of protein, then what? Like, what happens for the rest of the day? That's a huge amount of stuff going in.
Pretty much at that point, I could pretty much eat whatever I want for the rest of the day. And I always I can count on one hand the amount of times I've eaten food in the last year that I didn't cook myself. So I'm very big into that. I'm always cooking for myself. I buy as organic as possible. I like to buy in bulk if I can. And there's a little farmer's market every Saturday. That's only a couple blocks from me. So I try and go there and support that small business. And they're very they try and get everything organic too. So I love doing that. But the shakes is I'll typically a lot of times it'll fill 2 mason jars. I'll try and chug one before I leave, and then I'll take the other one with me and just bring it in a cooler. So all day I'm just slowly just swigging away at it. And just that keeps me going through the entire day. And it's nice too, because it's evened out. Those bodybuilder meals, because I come from a caloric deficit. I'm naturally a twig. So I've had to work really hard to put on any sort of weight. And it's the eating that really does it. And just sitting there and just trying to eat straight through 4,000 calories a day is
of
brutal.
Vegetables. 4,000 calories of vegetables. That's like 80 pounds of broccoli. You couldn't possibly, you know what I mean? That's what I learned when I did the Zone so much, is it's okay, you can have a half a slice of bread, or you can have 3 pounds of broccoli. whichever one you want, and you just start looking at these foods and you're like, seriously? Like, it is really that calorically and carbohydrate dense that, you have like a shot glass full of apple juice would equal, I don't know, a bushel of green beans. I mean, it's like you couldn't possibly eat that much. Like if you're only eating vegetables, man, you got to be putting some oils on them or something to get the nutrition up, because it's so hard to eat that much. I mean, lettuce, like you could eat like 3 heads of lettuce for the amount of carbohydrates you would get in 8 grapes.
Yep. That's why it takes just a little bit of knowledge. Like that knowledge has to be there no matter what you're doing. And for me with this stuff, I've found a couple power foods that really just like get me through. And honestly, peanut butter is one of the big ones. Like I've just noticed that like, oh, this stuff is loaded with protein. It's loaded with healthy fats, and it just like jumps your calories up so much. So I started adding that in. Hemp seeds has been a big hack for me too, because it just protein through the roof right away. Again, omega-3s, omega-6s, and which is another one that everybody tells you can't get from plants. And yes, you can. And
what? Omega-3 and 6?
Omega-3s and 6. Everyone always said, like, because whenever you hear about those, everyone's always talking about fish oil, right? That's what everyone always says. But the thing is that the fish don't produce it. It's actually the algae that produce it, and the fish concentrate it in their bodies. So there's it automatically doesn't come from those animals. So for me, I wanted to supplement that. And that's where just doing some, YouTube research for people that have, been doing this diet for like a very, very long time. And then on top of that, you start like Chronometer was really good. So like the 2 apps I use for calorie tracking is MyFitnessPal and Chronometer. And MyFitnessPal is really easy for like overall macros like carbs, fats, proteins. Chronometer breaks down if you're doing fats, it breaks down every single lipid. You're doing protein, it breaks down every single amino acid, and it breaks it down like that. So tracking in that was way more detailed. And that's how I was able to get, a much better grasp on what actual nutrient components, like those micronutrients that your body needs. Wow. And that's those hemp seeds and flax seeds, great source of omega-3s, omega-6s, really good for your body, really essential nutrients there that a lot of people aren't paying attention to at all. So I just, get the hemp seeds in on everything.
Yeah. So are you tracking this over time?
I mostly track, like I kind of do it loosely now because I've found like a pretty stable diet that works for me, and I have a healthy workout routine that everything is in line. So I really use like my strength and my body weight and visually looking in the mirror and seeing the results to see where I'm at. But what I typically do is I'll see growth and then it'll start to plateau. And every time it plateaus, I'm like, all right, I got to go back in. I start tracking again. I pull out the apps, I pull out the food scale, figure all that out. And then boom, it'll start to go up again. It plateaus, and it's cyclic like that.
And you're basing most of your success on putting on weight?
Yeah. Yep.
Because you're
when I started I'm coming up on about a year now of getting back in the gym. When I started, I think I was down to 164 pounds. Right now I'm sitting at 192.
Wow.
So in like a year. And the really cool thing is I looked at my progression photos from the last time I was 192 versus now, because that last time was pre-vegan. Now I'm vegan. And the difference is like crazy. Like I'm so much leaner. Like everything just looks like I remember back then you could see to my face like that I was just just forcing myself into this caloric surplus and just retaining all this extra body fat and everything. And I'm a lot leaner this time around. My recovery time is faster. I'm a lot more awake. I'm not groggy. It's just like night and day difference. When I actually see it, I'm like, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's cool. Now, have you looked at your blood over time? Like, do you go to a doctor and get your blood tested?
I've never been, because I've never really had an issue.
Yeah.
And
well, for me, you're just so into it and you're tracking. It's like I find it to be interesting if you're tracking so closely. like, is that mirrored in what's actually happening in your blood? Right. Like,
yeah,
and you would think it is, but who knows? I mean, like, I don't know. There's some different things. Like if you go to your doctor and you ask them to do all those tests, it could be very expensive, but there's some other, I don't know. There's this one, I think it's called Inside Tracker, and it'll track all different kinds of stuff, your micronutrients, everything, just from a couple of drops of blood, I guess, that you send in. And then I don't know, it tracks it on an app and everything. I've thought about, looking at that and seeing, because, it's like the more you get into it, the more you get into it, right? I guess until there's a reason not to. But the reason not to is that you're just constantly seeing the results that you want to, whether that's losing weight or gaining weight or getting leaner or just getting, more muscular. Either way, whatever it is, you're succeeding in your goals. And so then all of a sudden you're like, well, I don't need to track this anymore. Everything I'm doing is working towards the goal that I'm setting. But then, just like you said, you hit that plateau and it's like, okay, pull back out the scale. For me, that's, I mean, I eat what I think is a healthy diet, but my portions are always messed up. I love to eat. I mean, I really like to eat. I can eat a lot of food and I enjoy eating a lot of food, but I don't need to eat a lot of food. And if I'm weighing and measuring, I'm really surprised. I'm like, wow, that seems like a really small meal. But then you eat it. It's like, well, I'm going to eat again in, a few hours, and that's going to be fine for me to get through. But the meal prep is huge for me, of having the next meal ready to go. That's why I was asking you, like, what do you do? Like when you're going way out into the middle of the Everglades, like, do you have your food prepped? You're taking a shake in the morning, you're taking half a shake in the afternoon, and then nothing else.
I'll eat throughout the day, but like whenever I'm busy, my go-to is make a shake, bring it with me. That way, like whenever I start to feel that hunger creeping in, grab the shake, drink as much as I can, cap it, put it back, keep going. And it's just a constant like refuel. It's so easy. And for me, like being on like a 4,000 calorie diet for years, you start to lose that like enjoyment in your food. Like, and especially because on top of that, like back when, pre-vegan too, that was before I really figured out the shake thing. I was drinking shakes to like help get my calories in, but I was trying to eat as much as possible. So I was eating like 2 pounds of brown rice a day.
Oh,
on top of like that other 1.5 pounds of meat a day. And then on top of that, like just a quart of yogurt every day, like just sitting there, just eating it. You just hit when you start the meal, you enjoy it. And then you hit a wall.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, here we go.
You ever watch those videos of the strong men, like the world's strongest men, and what they eat and how they have to do it? And they go shopping and they like have 3 shopping carts and they just load that thing full of bacon and steaks and eggs and everything they can possibly get in there. And then there's this one video that I was watching, and it's like shows the guy's whole day of eating. And it's this, every meal is this, you'd think they're cooking for like 6 people. And it's just this one dude eating. And then he goes and works out. Then he comes back and he does that again. And then the alarm clock goes off and it's like 3:00 in the morning. And he goes in and eats a full meal in the middle of the night. And he's like, this is the worst part. This is the part that I will not miss when I retire from this. I will never miss waking up and eating a full meal in the middle of the night. And just like you say, it's like he was saying, I would rather starve than do this, than just cram this food in. He's like, but there's no way I can be as strong as the rest of these guys if my calories go down. And, I'm eating a giant pizza in the middle of the night because they just want calories and calories and calories and protein. And wow, it's cool, man. That's awesome, man, that you got that you're so dialed in on that and it's working. Yeah. What do you feel like?
So it's really interesting to compare because I didn't think about it much, but in hindsight, I'm looking back on it. So it wasn't like I didn't feel the transition as much as I'm looking at the 2 points and comparing. And definitely like I'm a high energy person to begin with. But like on top of that, I remember like when I would just eat like a pound of meat and then go to the gym, I would routinely fall asleep in the incline bench press. Like just that angle was just so conducive to just laying back. And I remember a couple times like waking up like, like, all right, got to finish the set. Let's keep it going.
Wow. And that didn't have anything to do with your sleep patterns or anything like that? You think this is entirely diet related?
For me, I think it's mostly diet related because I actually have like a very like my sleep schedule is a lot rougher now as it is, just between like flipping back and forth between wrestling alligators and catching pythons. My sleep pattern is all over the place because like some days I got to be up at 7 a.m. to wrestle gators for 9 hours. And then I have to be out all night and get home at 7 a.m. from catching snakes. And that flip flop back and forth is brutal on the body. But,
so when you're doing something like that, are you taking just a couple of shakes, no vegetables? No, you're not taking anything else. You're not taking snacks or anything else, or do you just do that on shakes?
I don't snack on much out there. I'll try and eat a meal like before I leave and like when I get back, or definitely like first thing in the morning, and just keep everything going. But for the most part, when I'm out in the field, the shakes is how I get through it. And then on top of that, a lot of times we have these, we have like pretzels and, chips and stuff. We're just snacking on. But actually the physical eating keeps you awake when you're out there for, 6 to 8 hours at a time, just staring at the ground. Like just that chewing will keep you awake sometimes.
Yeah, I gotcha. So what's interesting about this is you're turning into a snake, dude. You're turning into a snake and an alligator. You're having one giant meal, and then you're going out and doing stuff, right? Like that's what I mean. There's a lot of snakes that do that, right? And certain times of the year, that's what they do.
Yeah, these, especially as they get bigger too, like the big, like 100+ pound females, they might only eat 3 times a year, but when they do, it's typically a huge prey item. So they'll eat an entire deer, an entire hog, a full-size alligator, and they'll eat like 2 or 3 times in that year. But what the science has found is that they actually will retain on average 33% of the body weight of the animal they consume.
Wow.
So if they eat 100-pound deer, they're going to gain 33 pounds.
Wow.
On average.
Wow. And so when we see these viral videos of a python in the Everglades with the stomach has burst or somebody's cut it open or whatever, and there's an alligator inside of it or a crocodile or I don't know, how does a snake eat an alligator that is that size? I mean, it doesn't seem possible. Like when you see those videos of and I don't know. Some of them could be doctored. I don't know. They could be fake videos. I don't know. But I know that it happens. You last time you were on the show, you told us that like they eat alligators, right? So how does a snake eat an alligator? Do they squeeze it until it dies and then they try to eat it, or what's the process? Do you know? Yeah,
I do actually, because I've seen it in action, and that's actually how I figured out how they do it, was by witnessing it firsthand.
And you did that in the wild?
Right, okay. Yeah. Three times I've found pythons actively constricting alligators. 2 of those 3 times I was able to actually save the alligator. The alligator survived and swam away. 3rd time, it felt like a car ran that thing over just from the amount of pressure it put on it. Just ribs were shattered, eyes were popped out. Wow. So powerful. But the really interesting thing that I've noticed is on the bigger gators, when a bigger python grabs a bigger alligator, it's a battle of the titans. They're so strong that like they can't really overpower it the same way that like they overpower like a rat or a raccoon or something like that, where they just squeeze them out, restrict the blood flow, restrict the air, and just knock them out, and then just suppress it until the whole system shuts down. They can't necessarily do that with an alligator. So what I've witnessed them doing is they'll actually lock in the coils, they'll constrict them and just hold them underwater. Mm-hmm. And they'll let go with their mouth and bring their head above the water while the alligator is trapped underneath, wrapped in coils. So they actually drown.
Dirty trick.
It is, but it's fascinating biology that they've figured out how to do that.
I know. So, but the thing that I'm having a difficult time grasping is you've got an alligator that's just laying there, and you got the snake that somehow is going to try to eat this thing. Is it going to just bite down and hold on to it, and the alligator may start to run off? Or how is it getting the coils around the alligator? Because it seems like, alligators can run like really fast, right? So if this thing is next to it, why doesn't it just get out of there? How does it surprise the alligator or hang on to it long enough to get the coil? I mean, I get it when they get the coils around, like that's, I see how that can happen. And I can even see how, like, the skull might not be, it may be too big for the alligator. I could see how they could just crush that thing down into almost nothing and then eat it. I got that part, but like the initial attack, what do you think is happening there?
So the thing is, they're both apex predators. They're both stealth hunters. Like, a lot of people think, without knowing these pythons, that they're sit and wait. Like, they'll coil up and just sit spring loaded and grab something. They can do that occasionally, but the vast majority of the time, they're slow stalkers. They just move really slow, find a scent trail, and just follow it very slowly till they find the prey item. Once they hit it, actually, this is my roommate Ryan and his product company, Feel the Berm Products. He's this is a skull he did for a client, but what you could see in the teeth is just how they're
all facing backwards.
And they're all recurved. Yeah. So, like, the second that thing hits and locks in, if it penetrates the skin, it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, like, but that's the other thing that I'm kind of puzzled about is, like, an alligator skin is, like, I mean, super hard to penetrate, I would imagine. But,
well, the osteoderms, those actual solid bone plates, they're not going to get through those. Right. But really, like, in between every solid bone plate, there's a gap. Oh. And there's certain areas on a gator that are, softer tissue. The neck is softer. The arms are softer. It's a little bit easier. But really, all they need to do is just, they got so many teeth. They're all so sharp and so recurved. All they have to do is get enough traction just to hold on. Because the second that they get that, they immediately wrap. And
so, like, what I see you doing at the park, you walk up on these alligators, right? And they're just laying there. And I see this, like Manny, Tarzan of the Sea. He was in the Keys. Who I'm talking about? He would have all the videos of him going down, and there's just an alligator laying on the bottom. And I would imagine that that there are times where they just lay there, and a snake could actually sneak right up on them and bite them on the neck, right? Yeah. Without them, maybe their eyes are closed. I don't know. Like, it just seems like I wouldn't want to sneak up on one, but, like, I get everything that you're saying about once they bite them on the neck that they can get through that, but it just still seems like alligator skin is super tough, but a python is tougher, I guess.
Well, it actually, at a certain size, it really depends on who grabs who first or who gets the better grip. Yeah. Is really what it comes down to, because, like, gators have incredible power. They have incredible jaw pressure, but that's really all they have. Once you get the jaws secured, there's not, like, they can knock you off your feet with their tail and stuff like that, but they don't. Once the jaws are secured, there's very few ways they can still defend themselves. So once a python chokes out their ability to bite them, they don't really have much else in them. So that's where it comes into play. But they, once they wrap those coils, like, it doesn't take much for them to get traction. And then once they get those coils, and it happens so fast too. Like, even when we catch them and it's defensive behavior, every time I throw a rookie on a python and they grab it, they get wrapped up in coils, like, instantly. And then they have to explain to them how to unwrap the coils and get out of that. But if you don't know what's coming and you don't expect it, your reactions are not going to be calculated. They're going to be randomized. And that random, like, jolt reaction is a huge vulnerability, because the second you act irrationally and just thrashing, slowly start wrapping.
It's like, that's the worst thing that you could do. So if you were what do you tell the rookie? Like, how do you tell them to unwrap the coils? Like, what is the process?
Start at the tail and go, like, just uncoil it. in the same way, like if you grab a coil and try and separate it, you're never going to be able to do it. They're way too strong. You literally have to uncoil them. So you do that. And then once you have control of the head is really like, I've noticed this particularly, that like the main thing they want to protect is their head. It's their most vulnerable area. It's their most important part of the body. They protect that with everything. So like head and the heart. So if you can, their favorite thing to do is once you get that head grab, they immediately throw a coil around their head, and they'll try and just pull their head back out and like wipe your hands off. But if you can prevent them from getting that head coil, they tend to give up a lot faster once they realize that like they can't protect their head.
Wow.
So it's a little bit of like a little psychological thing that we've worked with. And I've found one of the things I started doing on bigger snakes, which seems dumb, but it works. It works so well, is I'll actually dive on them, flip over onto my back, hold the head up here, and then wrap my legs around the bottom of the body and just like jujitsu, like an arm bar.
Them out, yeah.
I'll just like straighten out that whole section. And as much as they're trying to throw that coil, I'm strong enough with my core to just keep that coil from coming up. And I've subdued 15-foot animals in 30 seconds flat. Like just because the second they know that you have the advantage, they'd rather play dead and hope you leave them alone than try and fight a losing battle.
Wow. That's interesting because like in jiu-jitsu or wrestling or whatever, there's so many counters to certain moves that are the opposite of what you think that you should do. And what, you know, you get a beginner wrestler or whatever that gets like in a headlock, for example, and they start trying to go away from the headlock, which is putting them in a deeper headlock. It's like deeper and deeper. That's exactly what you want them to do. But that's your first initial reaction, where you should go close to the body and get as close as you possibly can to the body and roll through it. But it's just a counterintuitive kind of thing, because every instinct, the first time that ever happens to you, is to try to get away, and you're only getting further in, right? And that would seem like the same thing that you're talking about with these snakes. Like you want to like get away, and every time that you extend out and you're getting away, they're getting a tighter and tighter and tighter coil. It's exactly what they want you to do. But you're saying you got to do the opposite. Well, I don't know that. Maybe there's some prospective python hunters out there that are listening to this show that are going to throw some jujitsu on a python. But I was interested in early was when you were talking about this time of the year and how difficult it is to find a python for a guy like you and a whole team of guys like you. So that would tell me that it's a pretty safe time to be walking around in the Everglades. This is the time I'm going, right? Like what would be the chances of you accidentally running into a big snake up there right now? You did say you were finding the males really easy.
Well, this is actually a time of year where they move a lot, particularly the larger class animals. We call it staging. They basically have to get into position for the breeding season, because the summer feeding grounds and winter breeding grounds are two different habitats. A lot of times they might be close by, but we've seen snakes go, several miles in a week to go back from where they were feeding to back to where they want to breed. So they're transitioning to those habitats. So even though like the temps are coming down, it's a little uncomfortable, their biological switch goes off and says, I have to get to my breeding ground. So they'll actually move quite a bit, but you're not going to see those smaller class animals, which tend, the bigger you get, the fewer there are in that size class. So those smaller animals that we see all summer long, those, 4, 5, 6, 7 footers, even those are younger animals, haven't necessarily sexually matured yet. They're just feeding, but there's more of them. So you see a lot of those. This time of year, it starts to taper. So you're not going to see those animals. So you'll see fewer pythons, but your average size starts to go up. So, which is really fun for me.
Yeah, like you're the record hunter. You want to get out there and catch the biggest one you possibly can. So, seems like a good time. So last time we talked about the overall numbers in the Everglades, and that efforts like what you do and other professional hunters and the whole program from the state. seem to be having an effect. What do you think now? Like where are we now with the numbers of let's just talk about just the python right now in the Everglades.
I don't know how much of an impact we're having on the overall population, just because the Everglades really is just so vast. It's just a huge landmass and or water mass, however you want to look at it.
Yeah.
But it's a huge area. And when you realize that most of the areas that we remove pythons from are levees, roadways, stuff like that. And then you look at the whole Everglades and realize how few of those strips of land there really are. There's so much land out there that I don't know necessarily how much of an impact we're having in the overall ecosystem. But in isolated areas, we can obviously make a difference. And for me, I just never fixate on the entire population. For me, it's not about that. For me, it's about every single individual that you remove, every single invasive apex predator that we remove from that ecosystem takes a little bit of the pressure away from those native animals that are competing for the same resources, or the ones that are getting eaten, a little bit of pressure away from them. And that gives them a chance to rebound and adapt and learn new skills to avoid being predated and get their breeding cycles back on. So I focus on that. And then particularly as we get into this winter breeding season, that's when it's really, really important to get those big females out, because those females can produce, the smallest clutch I've ever seen was 15 eggs. And on average, I'd say it's usually around 30. So that's a small female.
What's the survivability of
30 eggs?
And
I've seen over 60 eggs in a clutch before.
So if you see 30 eggs, how many of those are going to make it to a 4-footer?
So they have a nearly 100% hatch out rate. So almost all the eggs are typically viable and hatch out. It's a very small percentage that don't hatch. But of those babies, the majority of them do wind up getting consumed. Like there's almost a 90% mortality rate from hatchling to, those 8-footers that we see, almost 90% mortality, which is.
So what's eating them? Birds?
Sounds like a good thing. But it's actually a little scary the more that you think about it, because at first you're like, oh, well, most of them don't survive. That's great. That's a good thing. However, look how many there still are, which that means that as many as survived is still like 10% of the amount of animals that were introduced into the ecosystem that year.
Wow. And so what eats the small snakes, the 90% that don't make it?
Pretty much everything.
Birds. I would imagine birds are.
The birds will get them. That's a big one. Alligators will get them. Even when they're real small, fish, turtles, raccoons, possums, like everything eats them. But that's how a lot of these reptiles function in general. Is just they take reptiles and fish really is a big thing for them. They have as many babies as they possibly can, because they know out of that giant group, statistically, only 1 or 2 will make it to adulthood. So they know that all their babies are going to get picked off. That's why they have these massive volumes. And it's the same thing with alligators too. Alligators have big clutches, and of that clutch, they anticipate 1 or 2 will make it to adulthood. And that's how the numbers stay at a stable rate.
Do you have any idea what the the alligator population in the Everglades and the crocodile population in the Everglades, how those are doing? Because there was a time when they're very concerned about the crocodile, and then now the crocodile makes it down into the Keys. You see the crocodile all over the Everglades. And obviously there's more, I would think. Like if they're expanding their range, it probably means that there are a lot of them wherever they came from, and they're looking for new areas, new habitats. So do you know anything about that?
Yeah. So crocodiles specifically, it's one of the things to note is that there's never been a massive population of American crocodiles in South Florida. It's always from the get-go, from nature, it's always been a small population, mostly because of their temperature requirements and stuff like that. they're really just on the southern tip of Florida. Mm-hmm. It's very rare for one to even make it up as high as Fort Lauderdale. It happens, but it's very rare. They're mostly just on that southern tip. So from what the last time I asked someone for the actual numbers, they said there's around 2,000 crocodiles in South Florida. Those numbers may have gone up since the last time I talked to them, but I know University of Florida, UF and the Croc Docs, they do a lot of that research out there, and I'm friendly with a lot of people, and I volunteered with them a few times, but they monitor all that. And when the last house I lived in, we actually had it was Chris Gillette and Ed Metzger. And Ed Metzger used to be the head biologist for University of Florida. So at the time, he was like running that program. And then Chris Gillette was, a big biologist, and he was, volunteering with them all the time and doing the same kind of research of these, capture, mark, take all the data, and then re-release all these animals. So they had a lot of insight into that. And I didn't download all of their information into my brain, but I have some tidbits from the stories that they've told and the data that they're aware of.
Yeah. So the difference between an alligator and a crocodile, as far as like what you do at the park, would you like, you can wrestle these alligators all the time. You're very comfortable with it. Like if you go to your Instagram, you see you're doing all kind. You're putting your face in their mouth. You're doing all kinds of stuff. It's you've obviously got that down, and maybe those critters that you're dealing with are a little bit habituated, and they allow that. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. But let's just say that the North American crocodile wasn't an endangered species, and you could do the same things with that, just hypothetically. Like, I know you can't keep one in a park. I don't think you can, but would you be able to wrestle with the crocodile like you can an alligator? What is there a difference between the animals in aggression or their mouth structure or whatever that would not allow you to be doing the same kind of things that you can with an alligator?
Theoretically, you can. One of the really interesting things about those two animals is that genetically, American alligators, American crocodiles are more genetically different than we are from chickens. They just happen to look alike. Wow. Just because that model for survival works so well that they've been virtually unchanged for millions of years. So it's like so coevolution. Bizarre. Yeah.
Like, what is so different about them?
That I've never dove into, like the actual biology of it, but I know that statistic. And so knowing that, they're very different, but they're also very similar. And so personality wise, you could do everything that we do with alligators, that you could do it with crocodiles. However, specifically, the crocodiles tend to be way more athletic. And they're also, when you start getting into other species like, Nile crocs and Australian saltwater crocs, they really are built to take down human-sized prey
or bigger.
So they actually look at us slightly different, because the American alligators, like as much as they are strong, powerful apex predators in the Everglades ecosystem, naturally, there's not a lot of animals that would be anywhere close to the size or shape of a human. So they don't naturally look at us as a prey item. They're really looking at like turtles, ducks, fish, raccoons, smaller size animals. So they don't naturally look at us. But then you look at these other animals that they have animals that look like that. Right. And they start to prey on them. So there is a slightly different mentality there that you have to note. But like I've asked, that question, really most of my information from that comes from Chris Gillette, or Gator Boys Chris, as he goes by. And he's told me many times, you could do the exact same thing with a crocodile. For our purposes, we don't really have an interest in doing that, because all of our alligators that we work with are nuisance alligators that are trapped out of people's backyards from permits issued through Florida Fish and Wildlife. But it's possible to do it. We just don't really have the need or desire to do it. Theoretically, totally possible, though.
Yeah. I'm just curious. I mean, when you think back about the old videos with Steve Irwin, and you said that the crocodile is more athletic than the alligator. I mean, my God, what that guy was doing, and those crocodiles would basically have almost all four legs off the ground and be balanced on their tail, to get what what he was after. And there was this one video that I remember very clearly, and he was feeding these crocodiles, and they were standing up for him, and then he slips down into the mud, and he's like backing up into this mud. And it's like, man, that just seems like worst case scenario. He, all of a sudden his mobility was minimized, but that guy was cool as a cucumber always. He stayed so cool. And you know, he wasn't in a bad position there, but you know, the crocodile does come to the Keys, and they're around. I mean, people have them on their dock. They see them in their neighborhoods, and you know, they're a species. I guess are they endangered or threatened? But I know that when that happens, it's not like you can just call anyone to take them away. You got to call the state, I guess. And
yeah.
Who comes to get a crocodile?
It's very specific people. The thing with crocodiles, so since they are, you know, protected under the Endangered Species Act, and they're, you know, there's only about 2,000 of them, they're very protected. They don't do the same thing that they do with alligators. Alligators, you know, you have an alligator in your backyard, you call FWC, they say, do you feel threatened by it? You say yes, boom, dead gator. That's it. Someone will remove it. With crocodiles, they have a 3-strike policy the last time I checked. So they'll relocate that animal 3 times. If it continues to be a nuisance, then they'll try and put it in captivity or remove it from the system.
There is like a captivity for crocodiles, right? At the northern end of
you can actually own, like it's fairly easy to get proper permits to own an American crocodile in South Florida. When I say easy, I don't mean for an individual, but for a facility that has, you know, proper caging requirements and training and all that, they can get an American crocodile. It's not that complicated, but it's not one pulled from the wild. It's, right, you know, bred in captivity. Huh. So there's actually a lot of places that have them. And I even have friends that own them.
Really?
But, yeah.
Man, I don't know what I would want with a crocodile as a pet. I think that would be like the worst thing.
It's one of those things that we always just say, like, if you don't love it, you're not going to last a minute.
Dude, I mean, seriously, like, what do you do? Like, you want a crocodile? Like, I never really knew anything about a like a lion or the cats that people have as pets, but
yeah,
crazy. I don't know. Some people are into it though. Like you got snakes. You probably had snakes all your life.
Oh yeah. Yep. No, I got tons of friends with crazy animals down here. One of the new people I just met, he goes by Crocodile Kyle, and he's got an incredible collection down here, like different crocodiles and everything. He actually bred Nile crocodiles like within the enclosure naturally, whether it was, I think it was last year or the year before that, but he's got these crazy enclosures he's had built for him. He's got incredible animals, takes such good care of them. But even down here with the venomous snakes, a lot of people ask about that. And I know a lot of people like Will Nace, very good friend of mine. He's got a, you know, huge collection, tons of animals, YouTube channel. Tyler Nolan, tons of venomous snakes, like beautiful enclosures, really successful YouTube channel. Chandler's Wildlife, you know, tons of venomous snakes, huge collections. And the really cool thing about all those people I just named is I am in large part one of the people that feeds their king cobras.
Ooh.
Like some of them almost me exclusively, because I catch Burmese pythons, which is a natural prey species for the king cobra. So it's this cool little network that I got going on, that when I catch pythons that are the proper size for their animals, coil them up, throw them in the freezer. We deep freeze them for a minimum of 2 weeks. Some people wait as long as 3 months to kill off any potential pathogens that could be in them, because they are a wild animal. And then they thaw them out and feed them to their king cobras. So it's this beautiful little like circle of, this is an invasive species, we're removing it, and nothing goes to waste. Wow. And like these people are growing these king cobras in South Florida. And I actually just expanded that within the last year to actually be able to supply king cobra owners who are out of state with, you know, Burmese pythons that I've caught here in South Florida. So we're taking this invasive problem here and using it to help these reptile keepers like all around the US who are like looking for food for their king cobras.
So somebody that has a king cobra and they're keeping it.
Yeah.
Do they get it out and play with it? Like, what do you?
Oh yeah,
they do.
Yeah. Yeah.
My God, why? Like, that just seems like, I don't know. You see those videos of the guys that you know, in whatever native country they're in, and they tap them on the head, and they put their hand under their chin, and they're doing all kinds of things. But man, I think that's a little walking a little too close, flying a little too close to the sun for me. You know, like, I don't think I would be doing that. But I mean, it
happens. But the thing is, like, one of my favorite things to say about that is, like, because I've been handling venomous snakes since I was a teenager, and I've grown up around them. Like, it's been a passion of mine for many years. There's a huge difference between perceived danger and calculated danger. Mm-hmm. Like, perceived risk, calculated risk. So I always like to pull that in perspective, because for us, when we're handling venomous snakes, we know what's safe and what's not, and we have a lot of training and experience in it. So for me, I never really go above 30% risk, like, by my calculations. Mm-hmm. However, my 30% risk looks like 90% risk to someone who doesn't understand these animals, has never worked with them, has never been a part of anything like that. So that little shift in perception is big. And I like to always bring that in, because people don't really think about that. But yeah, we don't take as much risk as people think it is. Right. But I mean, there's always risk involved in anything that you do. But, you know, a good example is, like, you know, people that drive motorcycles. You know, people die in motorcycle crashes every year. We know it's dangerous. If you've ever owned a motorcycle, I'm sure your parents told you not to do it. Yeah, you know, for sure. But you love it and you just do it. And it's really very similar to what we do. Like, I work with alligators and pythons and venomous snakes, and I know that they can kill me, but I love it so much, I don't care. I accept that risk and go forward with it, just because I know what I'm getting into. But that passion and drive is so strong, nothing's going to stop me.
I like it. So what's next for you?
Well, I don't know, really. I'm kind of waiting.
Vegan bodybuilding contest?
Yeah, we're getting there that way. But I'm kind of in a transitional period right now. So one of the things I'm really looking to do is start up the YouTube and really get that going. And I've got a lot of footage saved up, but I really just need to find, like, a professional editor that can help me out with that kind of stuff, because I really just don't have the time to edit all that footage. But I got the channel up and running. Snakeaholic is all my other stuff is. And I've been monetized and everything like that. I'm just trying to actually start producing more content on a regular basis. So that's a big one. And overall, for my whole life, like, dude, Steve Irwin was my idol. That's why I'm here today. And in the back of my brain, I know that that's where I want to go. Like, I want to go to TV and everything like that. It's on my to-do list, and I don't necessarily know how I'm going to get there, but I know I'm going to get there eventually. So I don't know what's going to happen in the next, year, 2 years, 3 years. But my big thing is just go with the flow. Just be motivated, be, dedicated and passionate about what you do, and just go with the flow, see what happens.
I love it.
You can only control so much of your life.
I love it. Well, you're passionate about what you do, and it's obvious. It comes through, and you got so much knowledge about all these animals and everything that you're doing. It's really cool. I'm really happy to have you on the show and catch up with you again. So Snakeaholic, you can find him on every platform, pretty much, his YouTube thing. That's what he's building right now. But if there's any editors out there that want an opportunity at watching somebody handle a king cobra, call him up. Sounds awesome, man. Kevin, thanks so much for being on the show, and I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
We'll do it again.
Yeah, pleasure as always, man.
All right, thanks. See you.
All right, thanks, Tom. Take care.